We are starting with slide 14, and this is the section on the simplest invertebrates. So it's going to include the sponges, the ctenophora, and the cnidarians. So we'll begin with the sponges. They're called parazoa. Parazoa means they don't have true tissues. But they're from the phylum Porifera, which I don't see on here, but probably on the next one. But the word parazoa, that means the animals that don't have true tissues. So sponges are parazoa, and that means they lack true tissues. The other word, the opposite of parazoa, I think is eumetazoa. Hold on and I'll find out because I forget that word sometimes. Great, doesn't say it. Oh, it would be the ctenophora that would be the first ones. They don't even have the word on here. Anyway, I know where it is. Yes, the eumetazoa are the ones that do have true tissues. Okay, so parazoa means they don't have true tissues, and sponges are the only parazoans. They are from the phylum Porifera. Let's see, that's not on here either. Okay, I'm going to put it in the notes because that's important. You need to know the phylum name for all these different animals. Not just that they're called parazoa. So I'll just go like this. Sponges are in the phylum Porifera. And you can remember that because, you know, they form those pores, little pores. Okay, so sponges are in the phylum Porifera, and they do not have true tissues, but they do have a few different cell types. They have sac-like bodies that have many pores. That's why they're called sponges. They have these cells called choanoflagellates, like the protozoans kind of, but the flagella helps to draw water into the sponge's body. And so the sponge is a filter feeder, uses those flagella to help it filter feed. And it's also sessile. As an adult, it is sessile. But its larvae can move, and so that's why we say that animals have movement at some stage of their life cycle. So they reproduce both sexually and asexually. Their asexual reproduction is either by fragmentation or a process called budding, kind of like yeast. And their sexual reproduction includes a sperm and an egg. So they do have a larva that can swim. So at the larval stage, they do move. And sponges are capable of regeneration. Here's a picture of a yellow tube sponge, and you can see that big opening is called the osculum. And what happens is water goes, we can look at picture B, water goes in through the pores and out through the osculum, and then inside of the body, there are those choanoflagellates and or choanocytes. They're called choanoflagellates if they're protozoans, and then they're called choanocytes or collar cells in the sponge. And the choanocyte is attached, or it's close to an amoeba site. So basically, the flagellum helps it to filter feed. The food moves in to the amoeba site, and the amoeba site breaks it down. The amoeba site takes in the food by phagocytosis, just like an amoeba. So it's kind of cool. You have cells in the sponge that resemble choanoflagellates, which are protozoans, and then you have cells that resemble amoeba, which are also protozoans. So anyway, the water moves in through the pores and out through the osculum, and the sponge is a filter feeder. Oh, there's a question about the spicules. There are these sharp, hard it's not bones, but there are these structures called spicules that kind of give the sponge some protection and sort of a skeleton, not really a true skeleton, but sort of a skeleton. Now, the next phylum is the Ctenophora. So this is actually the phylum name, Ctenophora. The C is silent. The Ctenophora are the comb jellies. Now, the comb jellies, just like true jellyfish, have only 2 tissue layers. So they are diploblastic. They are bioluminescent. If you ever go to the aquarium in Atlantic Beach, Pine Knoll Shores, I think is technically the name of the little town, they have a tank that has like probably 50 to 100 comb jellies in it. It's so cool. They have it in a dark corner, and you can see they almost look like LED lights, you know. They produce their own light. That's what bioluminescent means. Now, their body, they do have the mesoglia, which is the jelly-like substance that you find in true jellyfish. But their entire body is composed of it. Go on. I'm sorry, it's my cat. So, they do not have stinging cells, and that's the reason they're in their own phylum. They are not in the same phylum with the jellyfish. Now, the phylum Cnidaria, also diploblastic, 2 tissue layers, and it's going to include all of the animals in this phylum have specialized stinging cells called cnidocytes. That's where they get their name. And in those stinging cells, they have a capsule called a nematocyst. They have an outer and inner layer for their body. The outer layer is produced from ectoderm tissue. The inner layer is produced from endoderm tissue. They don't have any mesoderm. And they have what's called a gastrovascular cavity. So let's talk about what that means. Gastro would refer to a digestive system, and vascular would refer to a system of transport, blood vessels, in other words. So they have a cavity that carries out both functions, digestion and transport, okay? So there are 2 body forms in the cnidarians. There's the polyp, where the tentacles are up, and the medusa, where the tentacles are down. So in the polyp, you can think about a sea anemone, and the medusa, you can think about a jellyfish. Now, picture A is not a cnidarian. Picture A is a Ctenophora, a comb jelly. So these do not have stinging cells. And then, of course, you can see in picture B, this is a jellyfish. And this is the medusa body form, where the tentacles are down. And jellyfish are cnidarians, and they do have stinging cells. So let's talk about some other cnidarians besides jellyfish. We have sea anemones. Sea anemones, like in Finding Nemo, if you've ever seen that movie. Sea anemones are sessile, and they have the polyp body form. But they do have those stinging cells that that contain nematocysts, and that is the reason why the clownfish can live inside of the sea anemones, because the clownfish have a protective covering, mucus covering on the outside of their bodies that protects them from the sting of the sea anemone. Then we have corals, which actually produce the shell that we know as a coral, but a coral really has an animal inside. So corals are little animals like sea anemones. They have the polyp body form, and they are encased in calcium carbonate, which is the same material that makes chalk. And they build the coral reefs. So the Great Barrier Reef along the coast of Australia, and then the coral reefs that you find in along the equator. Here's some pictures. Here's a sea anemone. Here is a cup coral, what the coral animal actually looks like before you just see the shell that's left after it dies. Here's just a regular jellyfish. And you may have seen these Portuguese man-of-war along the beach sometimes. A Portuguese man-of-war is not a jellyfish. It's actually a colony of cnidarians. But you may recognize this part of it because a lot of times when you see it on the beach, when they're dead, this little portion of its body is kind of clear and purple at the same time. It's got the purple parts. The ones I've seen have more purple in them, but they're clear and they're purple, and they just have a different look than the jellyfish do. Okay, a freshwater cnidarian is a hydra, and it's got a polyp body form, but it does live in freshwater. You can find these in pond water. And this is supposed to say polyp, not poly, P-O-L-Y-P. And then you have the true jellyfish, which have the medusa body form. And this is a good picture of budding. The hydra, what they do is they form a little bud. This is asexual reproduction in a hydra. They form a little bud on the side of their body, and that little bud forms into a baby hydra, which grows into an adult hydra. And you can also see the two tissue layers in any cnidarian. The gastrovascular cavity is inside in here. That's called the gastrovascular cavity. And then they have the inside tissue layers formed from endoderm, and then the outside tissue layers formed from ectoderm tissue. You can see the stinging cells called cnidocytes, and inside of there is the nematocyst, which is what causes the pain. It's like a trigger mechanism. So when the cnidarian, whatever type of cnidarian it is, actually touches something, it's like a trigger, and that nematocyst pops out and stings whatever it touches. And then we have the mesoglia, which is the layer in between the endoderm and the ectoderm tissue. That's where the mesoglia is, whereas there's a whole lot more mesoglia in the body of the Ctenophora. Now let's talk about Lophotrochozoans. Lophotrochozoans all have bilateral symmetry, whereas we had the radial symmetry in the jellyfish and the comb jellies. At least during one stage of their development, they're bilaterally symmetrical. They have 3 tissue layers, so they show the protostome pattern of development, unless they're flatworms, which you can't call them protostomes because they don't even have a body cavity. Some do have a true coelom, and some have what is called a pseudocoelom. Some don't have a coelom at all. The reason for the term Lophotrochozoan has to do with the larvae in a the Lophophore larvae. It looks like this, and the Trochophore larvae looks like this, and that's what distinguishes them. So the group called the Trochozoans includes the mollusk, the phylum Mollusca, and mollusk means soft-bodied. And every mollusk, whether it's a snail or a clam or an octopus, has 3 parts to their body. They have a visceral mass. Visceral refers to internal organs. So they have a visceral mass, and we're going to start to see body organs, like primitive kidneys and a primitive stomach, that kind of thing. They have a mantle, which can secrete the shell, and then it may not. Some have a shell and some don't. And then they have a muscular foot. And here is a snail body plan, and you can see the visceral mass in here. And you can see the foot, which is along the stomach. That's why we call snails, they are in the class gastropod or gastropoda, because it means stomach-footed. They have a digestive gland and a stomach. They have a primitive heart and 2 blood vessels. So you can see all of these different, they have gills for breathing. So you can see all of these different organs. Here's the foot along its ventral area, and then along its dorsal area it does have a shell that's secreted by the mantle. Mollusks do have a true coelom. They do have a sort of nervous system. They're becoming a lot more complex from the sponge and the cnidarians. And they have a fluid called hemolymph. So it's like a mixture of blood and tissue fluid. And then the heart, there's a heart that actually pumps hemolymph through vessels into a hemocoel, that's the name for the area where the hemolymph is pumped into. It's the area of the coelom. Now, there's the gastropods, which I told you about, which include the snails and the slugs. There's the bivalves, the class Bivalvia, which includes anything with two shells. So you see examples here: clams, oysters, mussels, which are freshwater clams, and scallops. They have an open circulatory system, which means that, if we go back to the picture, they have a heart and they have blood vessels, but the blood vessels pump the fluid, the hemolymph, into an open space. The blood vessels are not connected. We have a closed circulatory system. This is a picture of a scallop, which is my favorite shell to collect at the beach. And these little blue dots are eyes. They have the scallop animal inside here has many, many eyes. So I love scallops. I think they're so cool. So that's a scallop. These are mussels, which are like freshwater clams. And then we have the gastropods, the class Gastropoda, which includes the slugs and the snails, which we recognize from live on land. And then the ones that have these beautiful shells that we collect at the beach, whelks and conchs. Conch shells. Those are the ones you hold to your ear and you can hear the ocean. I don't know if you've ever done that. Then we have gastropods called limpets, and then gastropods called nudibranchs. But they have one shell, and their gastropod means stomach-footed. They have a foot that helps them, that's on their stomach side, and helps them to kind of crawl along. This is a flamingo tongue shell. This is a nudibranch. Anyway, then you have, of course, just a regular land snail. And lastly, we have the cephalopods, which means head-footed. So the class Cephalopoda includes the squid, the octopus, and then one that is really, really cool called the cuttlefish. Cephalopod means head-footed. They do not typically have a shell, and they have very well developed head region and sense organs, and they're able to learn. They're very, very smart. And actually, this one does have a shell. I forgot about the chambered nautilus. So here's a chambered nautilus, which is a cephalopod that does have a shell. These are squid. And we're going to stop here with this recording, and this is on slide number, I can't see because of the, there. Slide number 33, so we'll start with slide 34.